next speaker is Angela Gold from Wisconsin, and she got acquainted with the Kolbe Center a couple of years ago and began trying to find a way to spread the word in Wisconsin. And she was very patient and persevered, and eventually was able to get Pro-Life Wisconsin, the main no-compromise pro-life organization in the state, to actually sponsor a Kolbe Center tour. But it was very, very difficult for her to accomplish that, and even after she was able to get the leadership of Pro-Life Wisconsin to agree to sponsor a Kolbe tour, that was only the beginning of their trials, because within the Catholic community, and I'm talking about fairly traditional Catholics and homeschoolers and pro-lifers, they met tremendous resistance, and they had to overcome a great deal of opposition. And she persevered, and the tour eventually took place and was very successful. So she is a wonderful example of what it takes to advance this mission. It is not easy, and I think that what she's going to share with you is some of the most valuable practical information that you will take away from this conference if you really want to try to advance this mission in your local area. So please greet Angela Gold and her son Matthew. And you have time.
Okay, thanks. He's setting my timer for me, so I don't go too long. There you go, we're set, thank you. Okay, could we start with a prayer, please? Son, and the Holy Ghost, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen. Well, it's a great privilege and honor to be here, and I'm very humbled to be here to speak after all the experts. I'm a wife and mother. I have 3 wonderful children. You just saw my oldest, Matthew. And just want to give you a very brief little bit about my background, who I am, and how I came to do this. I have a business degree from Notre Dame. I have a master's in foreign language from Marquette. In my former career, I was in banking. I ended my career as a vice president in wealth management, private banking. But now my full-time job is my family and my kids. And I also do work part-time. I'm very fortunate. I have the ability to teach online courses at our local community college, so I do that. And I'm still able to stay home full-time with my kids. But I was able to organize a Kolbe tour, and that's what I would like to talk to you about today, and what's behind that, and a bit of the battle. And I want to tell you, first of all, how I view myself. I view myself as the connector, all right? I'm not the expert. I want to take the experts from the Kolbe Center, the speakers and you know, the theologians, the philosophers, the natural scientists, and all the academics, and I want to connect them to my community. And I'm here today to show you what I did, and hopefully, if it's possible, help you to do that. So let me just start with our model, what it ended up being. We'd never done this before, our organization, with any speaker. It ended up being a tour of talks, city by city, with one speaker, Mr. Owen, and all different topics, all different titles, but under the general united umbrella topic of the Catholic doctrine of creation, the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation as the best and surest foundation for a culture of life. So again, it was sponsored by a 100%, no exceptions, pro-life organization. So I want to clarify exactly what that meant. What that meant was there was one sponsoring organization, all right? They were, the mission fit their mission and they were financing it, but also then there were 6 host organizations, which ended up being 2 Latin Mass parishes from our state, 2 independent classical Catholic schools, and then 2 smaller private events which were not public. But that's the end of the story. I'm going to tell you the story about kind of how we got there. And so I'm going to step back a bit. It's about maybe 3 to 4 years ago, I started listening to the Kolbe Center. I don't know if you've heard of this YouTube channel, Sensus Fidelium, but I think that's where I ended up hearing it, and I loved the message from the very first moment. But I listened to it for a while before it hit me. And then one day, it was like a ton of bricks, it just hit me. There's an astounding pro-life message here. I didn't catch that right away, but then it literally hit me like a ton of bricks, and I just had to invite this speaker, this Mr. Hugh Owen. I have to invite him, and I need to bring this message to our community. And that just became a very important mission to me. But the question was, would the message of the Kolbe Center fit the pro-life organization that I thought? I believed so, but would the decision makers in that organization believe so? If so, we're on. If not, game over. So please note, at the time that I pitched this idea to the pro-life state director, none of the mechanics that I'm going to tell you about entered my mind. None of them. You know, all the benefits of having a sponsoring organization and all that, none of that entered my mind. All that occurred to me and all that I could think about was the following. There's a connection between the belief in a traditional Catholic doctrine of creation and a mindset that rejects contraception. Because the acceptance of contraception, especially the chemically abortifacient, child-destroying methods, is the linchpin of the perpetuation of abortion in any society. And the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation, I believed, needed to be a part of our long-term pro-life strategy. Now, you're not going to be sidewalk counseling the errors of evolution. That's not what my point was. You're not going to be using this as, you know, our legislative strategy. There's all these different facets to the battle, but the facet that I was interested in was the educational aspect of our mission. And here's how I saw it. The traditional Catholic doctrine of creation is the seed of truth. Saving babies' lives, saving souls, lay embedded in that doctrine, and understanding the logic behind that needs some time. It's not a bumper sticker type material. Maybe you could even call it the opposite of an icon. You can't just look at it and understand. But that seed needs time to germinate. However, once it takes hold, it secures a strong foundation for life. It secures the love of God's infinite generosity in the creation of just one human soul, let alone billions. And it secures the rejection of the selfish lies and the rotten fruit of, you know, the evolutionary culture of death and the contraceptive mindset. So that's what I had in my mind. However, I would have to demonstrate that connection. More on that to come. So I'm going to give you some of the nuts and bolts right now of partnering with a sponsoring organization and kind of what that entailed. First of all, I want to say that any success that we had was really God's grace. I can't take credit for it. It was all God's grace. And the second thing that I would say is that the other second most important thing would be the message and the speaker, of course. Then after that, I would say comes the incredible assistance of the sponsoring organization. So if the message fits their mission, then once that's established, then now we have a dedicated team to helping us, a team that believes in the pro-life mission. So then we have a large statewide following. We have technology infrastructure. We have, for example, a website to point people to. I don't have that. A website administrator to deal with the website. And you know, something as mundane as a copy machine, all those little things that you take for granted, you know, they have this whole infrastructure to help propel this message much further than I could do on my own. They have, you know, a substantial database. They know their communities. So such things like, well, what's the location of the talk? Should it be free? Should it be a paid event? This particular organization, 100% no exception, pro-life, stellar track record of respect statewide. And of course they have a budget. Once something fits their mission and they know that this is helping them to save babies' lives, then they put that budget towards that speaker or that event. And you know, that's something that certainly could become exponential to anything that I could do.
But I want to mention too that the Kolbe Center was very generous in offering to offset expenses because, this is a nonprofit organization, so they don't have a lot of money to pass around. So they offered to share expenses when possible, and especially, for example, if it's a church that's a sponsoring organization or a smaller individual organization, they would certainly, it was my experience that it was all about the message, and they were very willing and accommodating to share expenses. Or have no expenses. So Hugh was so wonderful in not just offering, but preferring to stay in rectories and with Catholic homes. So we saved a lot of money on lodging and meal expenses, which, that's some of the rudimentary nuts and bolts things, but when you have a sponsoring organization that's a, not-for-profit, those types of things are important. So that's going to bring me to a very important aside. Now, my family was one of the host families, and my sister's family, and we were very privileged to host Hugh. And the sharing meals, the family prayers, the rosaries, even my husband and I sharing a glass of wine with Hugh after the kids went to bed, and or Hugh playing Uno with my kids and winning. Conversations during car rides, the wonderful camaraderie. This is individual evangelization. And my children got a wonderful education, in that short amount of time. And actually, the lead up to that, my son had a notebook specifically for this event, and he had questions ready for Mr. Owen. I'm going to give you a few of those questions. Number one, did Jesus allow himself to get common illnesses like the cold? Because we know he suffered, he allowed himself to suffer on the cross, but there was purpose to that redemption. Was there a purpose to getting the common cold? So he was already starting to think about things in his little mind. It was wonderful. Did Adam and Eve have a belly button? No idea. Were dinosaurs on the ark? So those kind of questions were just cute, and we did actually get the answer to that last question. And so sharing the message on a one-to-one level, at the adult level, and the children's great side benefit. So back to partnering with the sponsoring organization. The best thing I think that was so helpful was they were extremely dedicated, passionate, hardworking staff. Once they knew that this fit their mission, they were helpful with the promotion, the graphic design, the staffing and working the events, coordinating the travel, finding the rectories, families for lodging, all of that. And then another thing which can't be overstated is the flyer design. Each community, each organization had a different flyer, different message, all that, and then working together with that. So that was a huge help. Registration, another big part of it. Just having that built-in infrastructure for, if it's a paid event, which of course ours was educational, so it was not, but if you had to take credit cards, or if you need the contact information for the attendees, if there's a change in the time or location of the event, those small details can become very big later, and they had all that infrastructure that, I wouldn't have had as an individual organizer. Another thing that they were able to do was to organize donations for the Kolbe Center, which now normally this organization does obviously depend on donations for their existence, but they felt that the mission fit their pro-life mission so much that they were not only willing to not get fundraising for themselves, but they were willing to fundraise for the Kolbe Center. And so at the end of all of they were free events, but they passed around the hat, so to speak, and it was free will offering. And from my understanding, there was some pretty good amount of funds that came in from that because people really liked the message. So without all of this, as a wife and mother, stay-at-home mom, working part-time as a college instructor, it was really imperative, if I wanted to do this well, that I needed to partner with a sponsoring organization. And again, at the time that I introduced it, none of that occurred to me. All I cared about was, I want this message to get out in my community. So I want to talk about one other thing. When I wanted Hugh to come and speak to our community about the Catholic doctrine of creation being the best foundation of cultural life, it occurred to me that this link, we're always talking about a link in biology, the missing link, can't be found. But the link between the evolutionary mindset and contraception is devastatingly present. It's not missing, it's just buried. It's there. So after hearing all the benefits that I just went through, about the sponsoring organization. You may be thinking, all right, I could never do this on my own. No one person could do this on their own. I don't want you to come away with that thought either. It's entirely possible. You just have to mold it to that different set of circumstances. One person can organize. You just have to realize, okay, depending on my state of life, depending on what risks I'm willing to take, if I need to finance this, I would just recommend that you know what your limitations are, and maybe you can't do it statewide or a huge region, but you could do a seminar in one location, or you could do multiple topics at multiple nights in different places around one city. Or you could be creative. You fly in Hugh and then maybe do Skype for someone else, and have a town hall meeting or something, and whatever works for you. But it's definitely a way to do it. If you have, the ability and what your limitations are. But it's so much more doable now with emails, websites, social media, all of that. But of course, the individual organizer wasn't my experience, so I'm not going to spend time on that. I just want to let you decide from what I have to say about having a sponsoring organization, and you can extrapolate from that how that would work for you and take what works for you and decide what you would prefer to do. Okay, so I've talked about a lot of generalities, and I'd like to launch into a little bit more about my daily role and tasks. And in order to do that, I need to mention a few of the challenges. There are challenges of partnering with an organization. This is natural because now you're bringing somebody else on board. It's good to be aware of this. A sponsoring organization could buckle under pressure. Possible. You don't have the final say in how everything is carried out. All right, the title selection, advertising, wording of things, how things are done. Now, all of a sudden, you either have zero say in that or you have a limited say in that. And it's just good to work that out in the beginning so that you kind of know how you're going to work together. And it's always good to remember, I may want things a certain way, but the sponsoring organization is putting their face on this, and they're willing to attach their good name to it. And so I recognize that, and I respected the limits that went with that, but I was just really grateful that they were willing to do it, and they were willing to put their time and effort and expense towards that. So with that in mind, I cannot overstate the importance of this very next detail that I'm about to give you regarding the potential of buckling under pressure. Make sure that the biggest decision maker of the sponsoring organization is 100% on board with the Kolbe message and mission, and is willing to stand some pressure from friends, donors, general public. As you'll see, in the spiritual battle portion of my talk, this is going to be extremely important. I did have that support in a gentle giant of a very pro-life soul, our state director. He didn't let much bother him. He didn't let much dissuade him. However, in all honesty, he will be the first to admit this. I had to get him to that point. And this is his own words. I want to make sure you know these are not my words, these are his words. He says that I had to do it with a 2x4. So I guess this is where my duties kind of started, with a 2x4, in order to get the leadership of the sponsoring organization to connect with you. I didn't really realize I was using a 2x4, and he says that that's a compliment, so I'm going to take it that way. But I want to explain my side of the circumstances that may be helpful to future organizers. So, as I started mentioning this to him briefly on and off, here and there, because I do a lot of work with this organization, he said, okay, I'll look into it. And his searches didn't pull up, on Google, YouTube, any of the Kolbe talks that had a pro-life title. He was looking for pro-life type titles. They may be out there, he just couldn't find them. And so then I started sending him YouTube clips, and they did not have specific titles that were pro-life, but of course the pro-life message was embedded within the message. That's the problem, you had to listen and to the whole thing. Now, I understand there's a big time commitment because, people are busy, and I did send him 4 hours of YouTube clips, broken into 1-hour segments, but I had already listened to it twice, so why wouldn't everybody do that, right? So naively, I thought, why wouldn't, he listen to, well, maybe at least 1 hour and then go from there. But I couldn't get him to listen, he was too busy, and he couldn't see the connection, So honestly, the pro-life connection was not quickly and easily evident from what I sent him. And I'm harping on that point for a reason, because I learned that I needed to make things quick and easy and do the legwork for people in order to get them on board. I had to do the legwork. And I think that's what caused a little bit more of the work and the stress in this. But what I should have done was say, all right, here's a 1-hour YouTube clip, and at minute marker 38 and 25 seconds, it starts and then it ends on, minute marker 45 or whatever. And then, he would have been able to know, okay, that's a few minutes of time, I can spend that time. But then when he listened to it, he would have been hooked and motivated to listen to the rest. So anyway, sending emails and links, that kind of thing may not be enough. So I'm not exactly a shrinking violet. So as the good Lord says, persistence is necessary to get into heaven. So I'm kind of hoping I have a chance. So I waited for the next meeting, all right? Brought it up afterwards. Honestly, he looked at me like I had 3 heads. By the way, getting that look like I had 3 heads was just something I had to get used to, because it happened a lot, because I was trying to explain this link, and people, even the most dedicated pro-lifers, were like not getting it at all. Maybe your experience would be different, your community, whatever, everybody's experience could be different. But he did say, okay, send me that stuff again. So I did, and I waited 3 months, no response. So I called him and I said, hey, can we do lunch? My treat. So that's what we did. But before we did lunch, I went to my parish priest and I got his affirmation. I got his permission, because I wanted to back up my judgment that not only was this a good speaker, but they were worthy of this organization, because me saying that wouldn't have as much weight as the parish priest. So I did that, and I brought that with me. So again, this is knowing your limits. I'm not a church leader or an authority, so I wanted to do that. So now we go to lunch. I brought a full presentation. I brought Pew Research, I brought articles, I brought pro-life stats, and I had launched into, I thought, he'll be eating, I'll get this little side salad and I'll talk while he's eating. And I brought up cultural Marxism, I brought up Antonio Gramsci, I brought up the long march through the institutions, 100 years of taking things over, and then I brought it all together at the end saying, and we need a long march back to Christendom, and I believe that the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation is the foundation for starting that march. And so what happened after that? Silence. I did get yet another look of being a 3-headed creature. But this time, I thought I noticed a spark of difference. However, I went home and I said to my husband, I think I totally failed. I didn't get him to see the link that I see. Oh well. But in actuality, I find out later, I actually did something better, honestly. I got him to watch Hugh's interviews on the Fiat Ministry Network, all 4 hours. He called me the next day, and he said, Angela, we have got to get this guy to come and speak to us. And it was an important lesson for me to learn here. I know just enough to be dangerous when it comes to the doctrine of creation. I'm learning avidly, I'm studying, but I'm certainly an amateur. I'm not going to be the one to explain it. However, all I needed to do was be the connector. Get that person or community to listen to Hugh or the Kolbe speakers. That changed everything. But that still is, it was and still is the most difficult struggle. Just getting people to come and listen. They have to get beyond their biases. They have to get beyond misinformation. And it's such a macroevolution saturated society. But in this one case with this one individual, it was mission accomplished. He was on board and he was willing to defend the speaker, the message, and he courageously withstood pressure. From actually a very well-intentioned priest and a not so well-intentioned woman who would later try to get him to cancel the event. And that woman was from a homeschool group, by the way. But I will say this, the very well-intentioned priest, after getting a personal email explanation from Hugh, now I requested that because I said, this is above my pay grade, you need to address these, please would you address these? So I emailed Hugh, and right away I got a response back. I forwarded it to the priest, and the priest ended up doing some research, and he totally retracted his criticism, totally. And he decided that he was going to listen to the information from the talk. And for me, it was really inspirational the humility of that priest and willing to admit that he could learn more. And I had great respect for him afterwards. And in a follow-up conversation with that priest, because I wanted to invite him personally to our events. So in that encounter, he said that the encounter, that message from Hugh brought him to a more in-depth study of theistic evolution, and he no longer believed that any type, theistic or atheistic evolution, would be compatible with the Catholic Church. And so I think that this is what happens when a well-intentioned person who has an open heart hears this message. And there was another important lesson here for me, and it was always have the necessary information ready and at my fingertips. All of the stellar recommendations, the endorsements, seminars being blessed at the highest levels of the church, that type of information was really important. So I had to equip, and I did. I equipped the sponsoring organization with all of that information. And that made our event rock solid as going forward. Okay, so that was kind of a long departure of the potential of a sponsoring organization buckling, and I just want to mention the other challenge is that you won't have as much say in things, and I mentioned, the style of advertising, how things are phrased, and you need to compromise, and all of that's really important. But again, the sponsoring organization has put their good name on it, and I wanted to respect that division. So that's what happened. So now we've got the sponsoring organization on board. What next? I turned my attention to securing new venues in the statewide tour because, trust me, also at that time I had no clue what that would entail. Absolutely none. The sponsoring organization was going to host one event, and that's it. And they didn't have the time or ability to go out and find new venues. So that was going to be my job. So I was going to be integrally involved in this going forward. So I turned my attention to finding new venues, and that working together actually worked out really well. So this is what I set out to do, and I started with an email campaign. I sent emails out offering the Kolbe Center offering Hugh as a speaker. I sent it out to friends and family members, and I asked them to send it out to all their contacts, and exponentially so on, send it out to their parishes. And after all of that, all those emails, and this was pretty substantial, some of my friends have some really good substantial email databases. I heard back from one. And that was that well-intentioned priest that wanted us to uninvite Hugh at first and then changed his mind after he got more information. Thankfully, there's a really long story behind that, which I'm not going to get into. It's just too much for this time. But the misunderstanding ended very well. But it was a week of stress for me because it was at the very beginning, and it could have kind of ended things, honestly. But I did come to an important conclusion. This was really good that this happened, actually, because I realized that we absolutely needed a personal recommendation from someone who knew the priest personally. All right, it had to be sent directly to the priests and from someone that they trusted to get them on board, and that's just because of the climate that we're in, and that's our particular community. And again, it could be different from community to community. And also because in our particular community, the name Hugh Owen is not known. Kolbe Center, not known. Just to at least the entire group of people that I reached out to, and I did reach out to a lot of people, did not know him. So me saying that this is, a worthy speaker was not going to be enough. So at this point I realized emailing Hugh is not going to be enough. I needed to call him. I asked him for his phone number. I said, I really need to call you. And we had a really nice conversation, and I said, could you possibly, I know you have a really good relationship with the Institute of Christ the King in Europe, could you get one of them to write a recommendation for you and send it, because our priests are from the Institute of Christ the King. Could you do that? And he did. He set about to it and doing it, and 4 hours later, this was a Saturday, by the way, 4 hours later I was carbon copied on an email from this particular person who knew several priests in the Institute of Christ the King in my state. And he was a colleague of Hugh's who had a PhD in physics and was a father of one of the Institute priests in Europe. And this lent a good deal of credibility to, saying that this is a good speaker. And so also in that email recommendation, the good doctor recommended, he said, he mentioned all these different internationally well-known academics, philosophers, theologians, natural scientists, and he put all of that in there, and it was a stellar recommendation. And it gave a level of credibility that I could have never done. So again, it was important to know my limitations, and then also, of course, pray to my guardian angel to help me work around them. So it was this, I think when we were discussing it later, we thought that this personal recommendation was just absolutely necessary. And without it, we might not have had our event to go on. So at this point, we went from one priest who was kind of, well-intentioned but misinformed, who was asking us to cancel the event, to a whole group of priests who wanted their parishes to be on board. And of course, as you know, the other priest changed his mind and he no longer wanted to cancel. But anyway, a few weeks into it, we had 2 parishes to add to our venue list, and they were, he was approved to speak in 2 dioceses. So at that point, I now had more things to add to my tasks, in addition to getting more venues, because now we had 3, the one from the sponsoring organization, 2 Latin Mass parishes, but that wasn't enough because we had a whole week, so we may as well keep them busy. And I turned my attention now, and not just getting new venues, but also at this point I had to do email introductions between the hosting venue and the sponsoring organization, the program director, connect those 2. Again, I'm the connector. So I connect those 2, and then the program director takes it over and handles it with the host organization, and they talk about flyers and graphics and wording and travel between venues, and I'm extracted, and they go forward. So then, but I'm still a liaison between everyone. So at this point, I was constructing dozens upon dozens of very detailed correspondences, difficult phone calls for me anyway, to people, to priests who are not familiar with the speaker. And I kind of felt like an attorney at trial pleading my case. And it was a little bit exhausting, but it ended up working out. And so I did have that mom guilt, the child that needs me and is screaming in the background, and I've got, well, they're just about to say yes, and it's an important conversation, and you're trying to decide, what should I be doing, what should I not be doing, but I would soothe myself with the fact that I'm not chatting with my girlfriends on the phone, I'm not shopping online, which I don't have time to do anyway, but this is important work. And so even though I would have guilt at times, and maybe I didn't manage that, the responsibility of my station of life, my duties and my state of life as well, with the responsibilities of putting on this tour. I'm sure I'll find out about that on Judgment Day, but I did my best. I made mistakes for sure. But anyway, what happened was I realized that I needed to have the right information, and I needed to have it just like that, because I could lose people's attention immediately. And I need to have things on the tip of my tongue for questions, and I need to know it. So I would do research before my phone calls. I would do research before any emails, because I would know that, okay, I need to send the right amount of information. And then I would do written follow-ups afterwards with my emails. And emails were very difficult for me, because I realized that I needed to have just the right supporting documentation, because if I didn't have enough, it wouldn't be enough to convince them. But if I had too much, it would overwhelm. And you'll see that that would be paralysis by analysis, and it would make things very difficult. So I needed concise wording, and being an amateur, that was very difficult. I knew I didn't want to write a dissertation, but sometimes writing the Cliff Notes is just as difficult. So anyway, once I passed the venue on and to the program director, and I set my sights on another venue, I became more efficient as time went on. And I want to mention this. Hugh did give me verbal permission to work him to death. So I decided that I would do that. And we had a whole week, and I don't think he had a moment to sit in that whole week. So I had him, actually had him working before the event, because I would email him and say, could you please send me this? Could you put together this? Could you do this? Because I wanted it to be from the expert. I don't want to be doing it, So let me just tell you some of the things that I asked him to put together. I said, could you put together a prior venues list? Who else has hosted the Kolbe seminars across the world? Could you do that for me to show to potential venues? Because what I wanted to do is take this and say, look, you're in good company. This is a worthy organization, and it's worth your time. That's number one. Number two, I asked him to put together a bullet point page, short and sweet, right? A description, short description of all the evolution-related topics that he could think of that might be of interest for these different organizations, and all the different ways that he could speak, and then just a short bullet point, a couple of sentences after each one, and how he could talk about that. So like it was a page or page and a half, short, sweet, simple, to get the sale from my good old business background. And anyway, I wanted to be easy to understand and not watered down. And of course, I knew he wouldn't water it down, but I was afraid that in trying to make it too easy to understand, I wouldn't be able to put enough information in there. But it really worked out well. So the moral of the story was that I just needed to kind of keep my eyes open for the situation and assess it and decide what each situation needed. So in the spirit of keeping my eyes open, I also realized that anything that I was involved in could become a potential opportunity. So I want to share two of what I would call my creative promotion examples. So I attended a talk on Big Bang cosmology at a Catholic church, and it was given by a PhD in astrophysics. He belonged to the Society of Catholic Scientists. And in the Q&A portion, I challenged his theory on star formation. Think about that for a minute. A lowly business major from Notre Dame is challenging the theory of the star formation for a PhD in astrophysics. You can't make that stuff up. So, but you know what I knew? Here's what I knew. There's 100 people listening, souls are watching. All I needed to do was make a decent case for fiat creation. Maybe try and challenge a little bit the Big Bang star formation theory, and I could also be a living witness, even if I made mistakes or whatever. I could be a living witness to the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation, and maybe interest a few people in coming to our tour. So I spoke very briefly, at the dividing line between the supernatural order of creation and the natural order of providence that follows it. And that the fact that the natural order of providence came after the supernatural work was over, so how could natural science kind of go beyond that barrier to go back to origins? And I talked about the universe that God created in perfection, including the stars, was perfection, and we destroyed all that through original sin. And then, God didn't create a universe with flaws of death and decay, and He loved us so much that He suffered an excruciating death to redeem us. And then after that, we messed all things up. I know you know the story, but I want you to hear His rebuttal to that. Quote, "Well, that goes beyond the scope of my territory, so I'm going to sidestep that and leave it to the theologians." Unquote. And he moved on. So I thought, all right, well, I got my words in there, and people could think about it and make their own decisions. But I thought that it was relevant because we were talking about science going back and determining origins. So if there's a divide, anyway, he didn't want to address it. So that's fine. The lesson that I learned, though, from it was I didn't need a PhD in astrophysics to challenge that theory or to bring the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation to that audience. Just a few sentences, that's all I chose. And I chose my strategy carefully. I wanted to choose something that would make the most impact and something that I could address that had made an impact on me, and that's why I chose that. And actually, one man came up to me after the talk, and he said that he actually thanked me for saying what I said. And the way he addressed it, it made me think that it kind of touched his heart. And I think that's what the doctrine of creation does, is it touches people's hearts, and it's why the message is important. So at that point, there's this little crowd of people gathering around us talking after the event was over. I put on my saleswoman hat and said, we've got this tour coming up, and you might want to attend. And I sent people to the Kolbe website, because whatever I learned here, whatever part of it was right, I learned from the Kolbe Center, and you should go to that website. And so some of them did, and then some of them came to our event. So that's creative promotion event number one. Creative promotion number two was what I called the Scholar Lunch, and I just made that name up, by the way, because it sounded good. Anyway, how did this idea come to me? I have no clue. Again, maybe my guardian angel giving me a little spiritual kick in the pants, I don't know. But after all these numerous, and I mean numerous conversations on the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation with priests, lay people, a bunch of actually natural scientists, and all of my time promoting these events and trying to interest people in them, I realized that there was this large variation of opinions. Like nobody could agree on anything. And I thought it would be good if we could get certain men of influence in the Catholic faith to come together and discuss the doctrine and hopefully voice their differences, talk openly for a couple of hours. And so I targeted priests, deacons, seminary professors, and theologians. And I know you might be thinking at this point that after my lunch in the 2x4 and now this, getting these guys together, that I'm always trying to feed people before I get them to listen to Hugh. But no, really, it's, I thought, all right, what if I got them together for, this lunch or a gourmet steak dinner, some expensive wine, and a really friendly and inviting atmosphere where they can sit down and, just discuss this and have a really nice dining experience and a friendly atmosphere. But I would need an organization to sponsor this because it would be very expensive. And the good Lord provided, and we did find that. And we had a small group. We wanted it to be small and intimate, and it was. We actually had a lot of priests who were interested, but as one priest told me, getting all the priest schedules together was like herding cats, and it was. So we had a lot that had to cancel at the last minute due to funerals or conflicts or whatever. But many said that it was a worthwhile conversation, and one of the priests who attended was, a very influential statewide speaker. And so I think he had said that he had a great conversation and was glad that it happened. So anyway, I do know too that one of the things that got me to want to do this particular event was that I had gone to another talk given by a seminary professor who had given some answers very favorable to macroevolution in the Q&A portion, and it was just kind of sad to me that, all right, he's going to be teaching priests, and those priests are going to be influencing lots of parishioners, and could we get people together and talk on this? But that was one of those emails that took me about 3 hours to create, because this guy's going to be getting an email from some woman he doesn't know, inviting him to the steak dinner and talking with a bunch of other priests. And so I tried, but in the end he didn't come. But I think the good of it was that the event still went on, and I did get the opportunity to send him some good information about the Kolbe Center. All right, so just to recap. We have one sponsoring organization. We ended up getting 6 host organizations. I was the main liaison, and so that is all kind of done now. We've got, once I have all the host organizations, now my attention is turned to promotion to the general community. And my promotion will be separate from the sponsoring organization and separate from the host organization. So I do my own thing, and then they each did their own thing. So my focus now is on potential attendees and populating the events and everything that went with it. So of course, I had my own outlets, email blasts, announcements on online forums, Respect Life groups at parishes. And I have to mention one thing regarding this, because I realized when I was doing all this promotion to individuals, now these are people that aren't necessarily going to have all the background and experience, that I needed to explain the difference between macroevolution and microevolution. This was a huge miscommunication. And in my opinion, I think it's one of the enemy's best tricks, because there was so much honest misunderstanding in people of good faith who just would mistake the fight against molecules to man evolution with this illogical tirade against the mechanism of environmental adaptation. And there would be this confusion that, we're against something that was scientifically provable. And so once I defined that, no, there's a difference here, and one good, one bad type thing, and then it would clear things up. And they would, okay, yeah, totally on board with that for most people. And there was still an issue with theistic evolution versus atheistic evolution, but most people recognize that, the atheistic evolution, at least that was a start. It was not their cup of tea. Okay, so in the promotion of the community, I just want to define 3 terms and how I used that, the definitions and how they apply to the Kolbe tour. So we have marketing, promotion, and sales. Right. So how does this work? Marketing, as you know, would be doing your research on both the product and the targeted consumer market to whom you want to sell the product. And what's our product? Well, of course, it's the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation, what's sold. And then the consumer market is the people of our region that we are, trying to get to come and listen. And then we have promotion. Promotion is taking that marketing research and the knowledge of both the product and the targeted end consumer and putting it into audible and viewable, consumable pieces of information. And what would those be? Radio ads, flyers, email blasts, billboards, TV ads, internet ads, social media, church bulletins. And I think we had all of those except TV ads. So, we didn't have billboards. But, so anyway, so that's marketing, promotion, now sales. Sales is just getting the final result. Okay, the consumption of your product or your idea, getting someone on board with your idea. And my job as the initial organizer and as sort of the universal liaison, if you will, included all three things: marketing, promotion, and sales. And so I knew from my years of experience in the business world that one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is to think that the transaction stops at the sale. Even your college students, the college students that I teach, you get a survey at the end of the semester, right? So there's a follow-up. And so I knew it was crucial to do this after-sale follow-up, and I conducted several follow-up measures, to see if there were any concerns, okay? So if there was any misunderstanding or any, feedback, and et cetera. So I had done my promotion, the email blast, the going to personal events and all of that I had already explained. But once we got people to come to the events, I wanted to find out, okay, what were you thinking? Were there misunderstandings? And there were some misunderstandings, and I was able to, clear some of that up. But one important thing that we did was we had a survey at each public event. And I asked the sponsoring organization to create a survey, and it was passed out at each of the events. And I want to tell you that it ended up, there were 4 public events out of the 6 total events, and they passed out surveys at 3 of them. And of those 3 events, it was a scale of 1 to 5, and I think Hugh got a 4.8 out of 5, a 4.9 out of 5, and a 5 out of 5. So we're talking, high marks, and the events were between like about 50 people all the way up to 130 people. So you had one event where we had 40 surveys turned in and you got a 5 out of 5. So these people were really receptive to the message. And so I would go and I would just, I know it's anecdotal, but I would go to people after the events that I was able to attend. Some of them were in parts of the state where, I have kids at home, I couldn't attend them, but I would go to the events and when I could and ask people questions, what did you think? I would go to the leadership of the host organization and say, do you have any questions, or, what did you think about that? And if they had questions, I would point them to what I knew would answer those questions, either in books or pamphlets or the website, things like that. So finally, I knew it was very important as part of that after-sale follow-up was to also ask for a referral. Let's keep this thing going. So I sent 2 separate emails to the leadership of each of the host organizations, and I put in the first email, and they were related emails with related subject lines. In the first email, I sent a brief thank you, and it contained the event survey, so that they could see the survey of their events and what the results were, so that they could see how successful that their audience thought it was. And then in the second email, I did the request for a referral, and I said, if you know an individual or an organization that would like to invite the Kolbe Center back to speak, please let me know or let the Kolbe Center know, and then I would include 3 attachments. I included the venues, the list of prior venues. I included the international list of endorsements, the bishops and priests and Catholic organizations from around the world. And then I also included the PDF booklet of If You Believe Moses, of course, after getting copyright release from Hugh. So all of that I did also, but through personal conversations, I would ask people the same types of questions and relate to them the same types of information. And I did get response back from people when I would send that booklet out, the If You Believe Moses booklet. I would get thank you saying, oh, I'm so glad you sent that. That clarified some things that I didn't understand in the talk. Because as you know, 1 hour is not enough time to talk about some of this stuff. You can do your best. But when you mention things, and especially somebody's coming to this without a lot of background knowledge, there's going to be gaps in their knowledge that they're going to have questions about. So I wanted to try and fill those gaps. And one thing also that we did was that I asked to get copies of the If You Believe Moses book, and we made copies of those and put all of them on the seats, so every single attendee had them to take with. So, all right. Finally, I want to mention some promotional tools. These are just things that I thought about on the fly, going, like, all right, assessing the situation and realizing this could be helpful. Number one was a seat flyer. After getting approvals from Hugh and the sponsoring organization, our 100% pro-life organization, I took all of the saleable items off of their website, and I put them on, I made a PDF of this, but I put them on a one-sheet form, just one sheet, 2 sets, and all the items listed, and they were categorized, DVDs, CDs, books, ebooks, all that stuff. And it also gave me a wonderful opportunity to advertise the multi-DVD set that's coming out, and say this is coming up. And I wanted to do pre-orders, but it was a little bit too early. So, it's something that they could take with them in their hands and go home and look at it and then potentially order from that. And that worked out really well. And then the second thing I called the hook. All right, now this is just my made-up term, but it was what I realized that I kind of needed to do in explaining some of these difficult topics and making that link that people were not necessarily making between, the evolutionary mindset and contraception. I wanted to get a hook to interest people, because if you start launching into a dissertation, you lose them right away. Too much information, gotta go. And so, anyway, this is what I decided to do. I wanted to have something brief to put in my correspondences, the emails, or even when I talked to people. And I'm going to give you 3 of the hooks that I used. Number 1, here it is. Quote, on May 1, come and see Hugh Owen show the highly overlooked and crucial link to fighting the culture of death, and learn about a battle that we have yet to acknowledge and to fight. Unquote. Okay. Hook number 2. Come and hear about the link between macroevolutionary science and the contraceptive mindset. Find out how this propagates the acceptance of abortion and a flawed idea of the character of God, which facilitates a loss of faith and succumbing to a secular culture of death. Hook number 3, short and sweet. This one's my favorite. Come and learn how to make abortion unthinkable, not just illegal. Because I don't know, but I don't think we have too many laws on the books that say it's illegal to saw off your left arm. Why? We don't need to. It's unthinkable. I would like to get to a point where we make abortion unthinkable. Of course, I know people may think that's crazy to even think that way, but I think we have to think in those terms, make it unthinkable. All right, next, those were the hooks. Now I'm going to get to the bullet point list. This is a 1-page document that I actually created because I didn't have time to get to Hugh. I would have liked it for him to create it, but I didn't have time. I had to get this out right away. And knowing that there was one venue that was not answering me, and I knew they would be interested if I could just get them the right information, and they had like all 20 people that needed to make the decision, and it was kind of paralysis by analysis. So all the information that I sent them, they didn't have time to look at. So what I decided to do is I would put together a bullet point list on 1 page, and it would have topics. And it would be the topic of, a part of society, and then how evolution had corrupted it. Those were the, I would say like the titles. And then underneath that title would be maybe 1 or 2 sentences explaining it. Now, I'm not going to give you all the sentences, but I'm just going to tell you what the titles were. So keep in mind, the first thing is the part of culture, and the second thing is how evolution twisted it. So theology, modernism. Philosophy, René Descartes. Biology, vestigial organs. Legal system, case law precedent over natural law. Politics, socialism, Marxism. Geology, Lyellian sediment theory. Cosmology, Big Bang, age of the cosmos. And so what I did was I put that together, and then I said, if there's any errors in this, they're mine, but this is, to the best of my knowledge, this is, I think, some of the topics that might interest you in this. And after that, I would put a 1-sentence thing, and it worked. They were interested because they're like, okay, that's a piece of consumable information that I can look at in 5 minutes and make a decision, not all the other stuff that you sent us, which was too much. So finally, I had one idea for cross-promotion, which was at a local bookstore. So they were willing to put up our flyers and stuff our flyers into the bags of all of their patrons who would buy books. And they were willing to promote for us. And they were also willing to carry some of the Kolbe Center books in their bookstore after the events were over. So that was kind of nice. So it was kind of a cross-promotional thing because we would advertise the bookstore through the website of the sponsoring organization, and then we would advertise the bookstore on the seat flyers, and then the bookstore would of course have the flyers going out to all their patrons, and the flyers advertise the sponsoring organization, the host organization, and the Kolbe Center. So it was like this massive sort of like a triangulation of cross-promotion that everybody liked because everybody had the same belief system, everybody had the same mission, and we all wanted to get that message out to our individual communities so we could work together to do that. Okay, so now I just want to give you a few of the fruits and the results of what happened after all was said and done and our week-long tour was over. First of all, there was an area of the state that did not have a 100% no exceptions pro-life affiliate. And after the talk that Hugh gave there on the traditional Catholic, title of the talk was The Traditional Catholic Doctrine of Creation as the Firmest Foundation for a Culture of Life. And after that talk, they really wanted to partner with the pro-life organization to start an affiliate, 100% no exceptions pro-life affiliate in that part of the state. And we really think that the talk had something, an influence in doing that. There's also 3 different Catholic organizations that are currently looking at bringing in a full weekend Kolbe seminar. 2 of them I know are very serious, and the other one I think is pretty serious. So again, each of our talks were just an hour to an hour and a half, so it wasn't enough to get into all the details. But another, I think, of the results that was wonderful was this pro-life message was heard by hearts and minds that were influenced by it, and that, we had at least 500 people at our events, and then those 500 people have spouses and children and a circle of influence, and so it could just be exponential in that way. Also, and this is something that I would like to ask each of you to pray for, because a classical school benefactor asked for a referral through me, but from the Kolbe Center for a children's natural science textbook. I don't know, if there's one ready or not. Hugh gave me a contact that may be doing this, but something that wasn't evolution minded in it, and so we'll see if we're able to do that. And the Kolbe Center itself was promoted to our state, and our state seemed to be pretty dry territory. People had not heard of this message before. So anyway, radio ads, internet, social media, 500 people came. These were all seeds that were planted, that were future potential that only God knows about. So we can hope and pray for that. Okay, so that's the end of the actual part about the tours. I want to mention a little bit about the spiritual warfare part that comes with it. There's so much I can say. I'm out of time. I already mentioned the mom guilt part of it. I think that kind of goes without saying, just trying to manage the kids with my responsibilities during the day, and not having an office to go into and close the door and be able to have a professional conversation. You've got that, and just feeling guilty. But I mentioned that. That's definitely part of the spiritual battle. But there's another part of this battle that was really important, and for me it was difficult because it came to me as a blind side, a real blind side. It was the Catholic homeschool forum. I kind of thought that was safe territory. I mean, even if people didn't agree, they would be open-minded, and they would know that this this is completely legitimate. So I posted an announcement for our event. Nothing new there. Hundreds of announcements. People pay to be part of this homeschool forum so that they can find out about things like this, right? So we can all share ideas and share things. So I posted an announcement. Immediately, virulent and hostile reactions by just a very few ladies, but they tag teamed it, so it kind of looked like it was more. And so there's this one lady that immediately posted, these people are open to a young earth. They might actually believe that. Okay, so what? The question is, why would she need to bring that up? Honestly. I mean, it's not, natural science actually wasn't part of our pro-life talks. This belief is not against the magisterium. She had other motivations that were good. But I wanted to use that occasion and be positive. I thanked her for the opportunity to clarify. I posted credentials, all of the stellar credentials of the Kolbe Center and of Hugh Owen, our speaker. I posted the impressive list of people who supported their work, the clerics, the bishops, the priests from around the world. I posted Cardinal Burke's endorsement of their seminar in Rome, all of this. I kept it positive and brief, and I posted all the supporting documentation, and then on top of that, I invited everyone, please come, even if you have disagreements or concerns or questions, bring your most strident questions, even if they're off topic, and come to our event. We invite you all. That literally killed that thread. No one wanted to post after that. So I thought, okay, good, we're done. No problem. But posting such credentials made one woman very uncomfortable. When well-respected priests and bishops from around the world, and papal blessings of this group's work, it seemed that she was not accustomed to such legitimacy from an organization or from anyone challenging her worldview. And this group was challenging her evolutionary worldview. So she had two choices. She could come and listen and ask questions, kind of like I did with the Big Bang Theory. I went and I asked questions. And she could do that, or she could close her heart. I don't know, it seemed that maybe pride got the better of her and she closed herself off. But that wasn't enough. She didn't just close herself off, she wanted to dissuade others from coming and from hearing the message. And so what she did, she didn't post after my post. No, you gotta understand how this works. She started a whole new thread. So it was interesting. So she claimed that confusion had been caused. And she and her husband have studied this event and they know it well. And you shouldn't listen to any one person or group. Instead, just read Humani Generis. Okay, fine. Don't let your freedom be taken away. Read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, she said, and remember, it gives us all, her quote, her words, it gives us all the freedom to believe in parts of evolution. She didn't explain what parts. I was confused. A side note to all of this, I know her. She's a friend. She's called and emailed me several times, texted me on numerous occasions. This is someone I knew. She could have easily called me and said, hey, what's going on with this? I'm confused, I don't understand. She didn't, and the reason, there was no confusion. There was no confusion. So I decided I had to counter her thread, and I wanted to protect and defend our event. The Kolbe Center and the sponsoring organization, a wonderful, stellar pro-life organization. I used a lot of great information. I backed up everything I said. I made sure it wasn't my opinion, it was authoritative opinions. And I was able to get that information off the Kolbe Center website, and they would point you to information from popes, from councils, from church fathers. And I posted that, and basically what I said was, look, I'm not an expert, I'm an amateur, but here's my thought. Take it or leave it. Humani Generis and the CCC are a great start. Read them. Perfect. And I pointed out, the questions about paragraph 36 in Humani Generis and some of the mistakes that I had been made aware of. But I said, wouldn't it be helpful to also continue one's study with the other 19 centuries that came before? Just a thought. I don't know. So then I got a good number of emails, phone calls, Facebook messages, text messages. All of these came off forum, mind you. None of them posted publicly. But they all wanted to thank me for the thought-provoking and charitable, because I wanted to keep it charitable. I felt a responsibility in representing these organizations, and they said thank you for this charitable conversation and this, what we called it, banter, going back and forth. And they told me that they felt they were learning, and I thought, I'm learning too. I have to look up all this, and try and defy. This isn't off the tip of my tongue. Believe me, I spent a couple of nights staying up and getting not enough sleep and being really groggy the next day. But interestingly enough in that is that none of them felt comfortable going online or going on the forum public. So what that did was it gave the illusion that it was kind of like me contra mundo. It was one person and there was all these people tag teaming, and it wasn't. There were all these people that were just afraid to mention that they agreed, and they were afraid to say, hey, open your mind up a little bit here. Okay, so I was told by someone else on the forum that I know that people weren't commenting to kind of back me up on the forum because they were afraid of dealing with what I had to deal with. They didn't want to do it. I understand why. So did it end here? No. It could have, but it didn't. One woman could not let this alone. Now we're on woman number 3, by the way, third homeschool woman. She insisted that any literal type of interpretation of Genesis was not Catholic. There's no literal aspect to Genesis that's not Catholic. That she said that's Protestant fundamentalist. And you know all that stuff about Eve and formed from the side of Adam, that's nonsense. You know, we don't teach that to our kids. We had a great Catholic, priest, this Monsignor George Lemaitre, who proposed what is known as the Big Bang Theory, and that accounts for so much of what's proven today in science, according to her. Quote, this is her quote. And she says, 1,500 people on this forum, mind you, souls watching. Quote, it would be a terrible shame if we allowed our kids to be taught nonsense in Catholic science classes, unquote. What's a Catholic science class? I'm not sure what, I don't know. Anyway, so what to do with such a woman? I countered, souls are watching, I thought, I simply asked her a question. Could you give me any authoritative or magisterial references to back up your opinions? To say when scripture should be taken literally, John 6, Eucharist, and when we should call it a myth and allegorical, according to her, all of Genesis. And I reminded her very politely that Luther was also a Catholic priest. She dodged. Complete crickets. No response. But she had a friend, apparently I found this out later than friends, that posted a link to a Catholic blog that she cited this blog as authoritative in showing us how to read scripture and telling us what's allegorical and what's not. I cannot leave that stand. I'm sorry. So my follow-up was one question. Is that Catholic blog more authoritative than the Council of Trent or Vatican I? Crickets. Silence. So I just, I felt this responsibility to put things out there that were not my opinion. I'm sure my opinion had to seep in there somewhere, but I wanted authoritative messages out there. I wanted links to stuff that would make sense to people, and it seemed, what bothered me is that other people were just like putting their opinions out there and they didn't care, it was just their opinion. I'm like, well, what backs that up? Why are you telling everybody else this? And what I kept saying, I'm an amateur, look this up for yourself. The other ladies, these other 3 ladies were like, well, I know this and I've studied this and you need to listen to me. And I'm like, really? Why? Okay, anyway. So of course, my whole purpose was not to try and convince these 3 ladies. I knew that that was, the ladies for whom facts did not matter was kind of how I named them. I was doing this for the others on the forum. That's exactly what I was doing, and they were emailing me and thanking me, so I thought, okay, there's a responsibility here. So, again, what did I get for my efforts? I got an unloading from these 3 ladies. Again, I felt the responsibility to defend the pro-life organization, the Kolbe Center, and the event from any misrepresentations. And I did a lot of research to back that up, and a lot of the research I got was from the Kolbe Center, which they pool stuff together, so they're getting research from all over the place and from information from authoritative sources that I could just pull from there. And I quoted Father Ripperger several times in his book, Metaphysics of Evolution, and I actually had a couple of the husbands who emailed me and were interested in that, and one of whom I connected with Hugh. And so, some of the men, there's men on this forum too. I mean, it's mostly women and teenage kids, but some of the men were responding as well and were interested. And funny, some of these men were emailing me off from, well, I'm not afraid to talk publicly about this. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you? And so it was, it was fine. So, because one gentleman said, I really agree with what you're saying. And I'm like, okay, post. Nope. So that's fine. Anyway, I asked Hugh, this is more homework that I gave for Hugh, I asked him, could you give me, could you write 2 answers to the frequently asked questions about theistic evolution? And I put them on, I posted them verbatim, and the tagline, the subject line was Hugh Owen addresses the homeschool forum. And I just posted it there verbatim. And there were some good, results from that, and people were interested, and I connected some of them, with the Kolbe Center, and that was great. But here's a fun little detail about all of this banter that was going on each day that there was banter, because it would be a day here, there'd be banter back and forth in a couple of days, and there'd be banter back and forth, because everybody's got lives in between. Each day that there was banter, our registration numbers went up. And attendance numbers went up. Now, I had access to those numbers. I don't have the names, but I could see the numbers. And each day that there was banter on that homeschool forum, it was clockwork. The numbers went up. And I did notice, too, that many people that I knew or that I recognized from that homeschool forum did come. So that was kind of a nice thing to happen. So could it end there? You would think. No. So one of the louder ladies, for whom facts did not matter, she called our sponsoring organization, this 100% wonderful pro-life organization, and she chewed out the leadership there for an hour. She said, you need to cancel this event. You are propagating Protestant fundamentalism. That's what you're doing. And she was informed by the leadership team, by the state director at the sponsoring organization, that our speaker was approved on church property. More of all the same credentials were given to her that I had given on the forum. She did not get what she wanted. So let me just do a brief recap here and do a little visual in your mind. Feel free to close your eyes if you want to, as long as you don't fall asleep. I want to do a recap here. Imagine a scale. It was posed to her. On one side of that scale, there's 2 popes with papal blessings. There's bishops from around the world. There's a former prefect of the apostolic signature. There's 2 dioceses in our state, all on one side of the scale. And then there's the lone homeschool woman on the other side of the scale. Which side of that scale? I don't want to be on her side of the scale. No. So anyway, facts didn't matter. This was all days before Hugh was to fly in. So we had done 6 months of work. If the sponsoring organization had buckled because of that pressure, all of it would have been for naught. All that organizing, all that time, all that stress, all that pressure, all that work, all the sweat equity, because of that one loud woman who didn't care about facts. If the sponsoring organization would have buckled, all would have been lost. So that's just one reason why the intestinal fortitude of the leadership is so crucial. And the state director defending the inerrancy of Scripture, defending the Kolbe Center, and defending our speaker, and all the credentials of the work. Let me mention one other noteworthy thing is that I got a call from a woman on this homeschool forum. She actually called me. She wanted to thank me for bringing the Kolbe Center. She said that she had been interested in doing so years ago. She had a lot of interest from that very same homeschool forum. And she was talked out of it by certain few people on that homeschool forum, who I guess they consider themselves the leadership. I don't really know that it has a leadership, but these few people talked her out of it. And later she said she regretted that. But in any case, I don't know if these are the same people that I had to deal with, but it's just interesting that there were a few people that already did know about the Kolbe Center, and they were trying to stop them from coming. Interesting. Not just didn't want to go, no, they wanted to stop other people from hearing the message. I think that's important to know. Why? If it's not against the magisterium. In the end, in my view, it was the absolute right thing to do to organize this tour. I learned from the experience, and I would definitely do it again, help anyone else that wanted to do it. And I would just say, for me, the worst part, which is my own fault, was just the mental distraction, which I allowed myself because I was always thinking. Sometimes I was just, mentally not present with my family because I'd be thinking about this aspect or that aspect. And so what I learned in that part of the spiritual battle is real, but it's surmountable. And I learned some very valuable lessons from that. I learned that I need to shore up my interior prayer life for sure. Now, Hugh did email me out of the blue one day and say, you need to wear a scapular, Blessed Saint Benedict medal, pray the rosary daily, and by the way, I would pray the Auxilium Christianorum. And I had been doing all of those except praying the Auxilium, so I started that, so now I'm doing all of those. So I'm going to end on a positive note, though. I am so grateful that there are people willing to stand up for what they believe in, even when others are afraid. I'm grateful that the Kolbe Center can pool experts from around the world who are not afraid to study evidence, both scientific and scriptural, that gives a firm foundation in the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation. People who are not afraid to debate publicly and forge on when others try to shut them down. I want to learn from such people. I'm grateful that our dear Lord has seen fit to allow me to be amongst some such people of strong faith who work hard to bring His truth to others, so that each of us have a better chance to save our souls. So, what has this experience taught me? It has taught me that Jesus was literal when He said, "How narrow is the gate and strait is the way that leadeth to life, and few there are that find it." And I want to thank everyone here for their dedication to helping others to save their souls and leading us to that very narrow gate. May God bless you all.